think we'll start, and hopefully there'll be some people still joining us as we go, which is great. My name is Zoe, and I'm going to be the chair of the event. I will introduce myself properly. So I'm the client delivery team lead for Mental Health First Aid England. So I work with the team who work with workplaces on training and awareness. I'm going to be chairing today and asking the panel questions. Just as a bit of housekeeping, if everyone could keep the cameras and mics off for attendee-wise, but please do use the chat if you've got any comments, ideas, questions. It'd be great to see that coming through, and we will be spending quite a bit of time on Q&A, so please do share your questions if you've got any. And I'd like to obviously introduce the panel. So Tari, if you could introduce yourself, that would be brilliant.
Thank you so much for that, Zoe. Hi, everyone. My name is Tari Okoye. I had the Wellbeing proposition at Morrinson Wellbeing. And we basically work with organizations across the UK to provide financial education to their workforces as part of their HR initiatives or, wellbeing initiatives and plans. And we will be, I guess, throughout the conversation, I'll be able to sort of talk to you about the link between that loneliness element, which is the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week, and how it links to our financial well-being and our financial resilience, especially in light of our current cost of living crisis, which has not made things easy for us. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Tari. Kevin, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Zoe. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Lyons, he, him. I'm Senior HR Manager at Pearson. I'm also the lead for the global MHFA Mental Health First Aider Programme at Pearson and co-lead of the MHFA community that we have at Pearson. I'm also a commentator on HR trends and topics. I'm fascinated by the impact of technology on society, and of course, it's very current at the moment, the impact of technology on the way that we work. I'm also really looking forward in this session to talking about the rethink that we need to have about what effective communication and collaboration looks like. And so we're looking at the traditional workplace and the impact on that, and of course hybrid working.
Thank you, Kevin. Mark, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're well. Happy Mental Health Awareness Week on this bright sunny Wednesday. My name is Mark Rowland. I'm the Chief Executive of the Mental Health Foundation. My pronouns are he and him. And I'm a person who spent many years working in international development on the issue of poverty eradication. I have a personal experience or lived experience of suicide bereavement, losing my brother almost 10 years ago. And it pivoted my life into a whole question around mental health and the quality of our inner lives and the impact that it has just about everything. The Mental Health Foundation has a real focus around prevention in mental health, and we run Mental Health Awareness Week to really look at some of those lesser known issues that often aren't related directly to mental health or often enough that have a big impact on mental health. And I'm just really delighted to be here and share this hour with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Stephanie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Lovely, thank you. Good morning, everyone on the panel and also all our guests here today. I've seen lots of different people from different places. My name's Stephanie Davies. I'm the Head of Happiness at Laughology. It's a title I made up myself. It wasn't on the career list at school, but I didn't fancy any of those careers. So I thought, why not? I've been doing what I do for 20 years. Before I did this, I was a stand-up comedian. And then I looked into the power of humour and laughter as a psychological tool. I did my master's in psychology a little bit later on in life, mixed the two together, and what you get is Laughology. I've been working in lots of different organisations, schools and community groups for the last 20 years, really looking at how we improve our mental health and well-being. I have a cat called Barry. He might come in the room at any point. I have shut the door, but he's learned to open doors. So if he does, he's welcome as well. So lovely to be here.
We should have put Barry on the panel as well. Thank you everyone for introducing yourself. It's great to have you all here, and I think it'll really add to the conversation to have some mixed background and experience. Just to touch on the panel itself, obviously it's Mental Health Awareness Week. The topic is loneliness, but we are approaching this conversation from a workplace perspective. So thinking about the context of hybrid working and loneliness and how workplaces might tackle these issues moving forward. Mark, because it's obviously great to have you here from the Mental Health Foundation, it'd be wonderful if you could tell us a little bit about Mental Health Awareness Week and this year's theme.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think you've captured some of the key messages brilliantly there in that slide. And, you know, we've been tracking the mental health impacts of the pandemic since about March 2020. And the impact on the dislocation in our lives was profound. Loneliness came to our doorsteps, each one of us, as we had our social ties disconnected, didn't we? And yeah, we really just wanted to have a focus on the impact of loneliness, particularly teasing out what is it about the experience of loneliness that has an impact on our mental health. And there is something so important about the quality. You know, loneliness isn't about the number of friends we have or the time that we spend alone, which we need to. We need time on our own. But it is about this, what we're defining it as, this mismatch between the quality and quantity of the social connections that we need and that we're actually getting. And that means it's different for all of us. And that means we need a conversation about what does that social connection mean? What does meaningful human contact mean for you? What does that look like? What does it feel like? And why are we not able to get more of it? How do we create a society that creates the conditions for us to get that basic requirement that we need, which is like a foundation stone for positive mental health? And one of the things that came through this week was just so much shame, so much stigma, so much embarrassment about our experience of loneliness. And honestly, it's been so moving. It's been so moving to see people with courage. I think we've had the largest sharing of loneliness stories ever in the UK. People have said that they're more ashamed of loneliness than they are the experience of poor mental health. I'll be happier to talk about the fact I'm anxious or depressed than I've been lonely. And one of the myths that we've been trying to bust this week is that loneliness is somehow related to who you are or your ability or your identity. It's a feeling, it's an important feeling because it's telling us something that we need to respond to. And, you know, we've had a really great response to it. It was in Parliament yesterday with parties across the political spectrum saying the change that's needed to address loneliness and its impact on our mental health and reduce the stigma on it. So social connections at work are a really big part of that, and really looking forward to the discussion to say what is workplace's role in social connection, especially in relation to people who, and one of the things we brought out is like, if you are poorer, if you're disabled, if you're from a minority ethnic group, if you are identifying as LGBTQ, you're actually much more likely. If you're a younger person, you're much more likely to experience loneliness. So we wanted to have a look at how we make an extra effort to connect with people who are at greater risk. And I'll just finish by saying, you know, if you're a renter, you're more likely to experience loneliness. And that's not that if you're from a minority ethnic background, that somehow there's nothing about that is related to having less social connection. But if you've experienced discrimination and forms of social exclusion, then it is natural that you tend to withdraw. Or if you are living in rented accommodation and you're in secure employment, or if you're poorer, you have less access to that social connection. So there's a real social justice element that we wanted to get through. If you're not sure how to pay the rent, then connecting to your community is just a harder thing to do as well. And workplace has a really important component in providing that continuity and contact. So I will stop there. There's so much more that we could say, but really looking forward to the rest of the discussions today. Thank you for having me as well.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for saying everything that you just said. It's really helpful to put into context. Just extending a little on what Mark has been telling us about loneliness and Mental Health Awareness Week, obviously to bring this into a workplace perspective, when we're talking about workplace loneliness, we're referring to that feeling of disengagement or disconnection to your work and your peers. And obviously that lack of connection can unfortunately lead to an increased risk in stress and anxiety and depression. And the government has estimated that this disconnection and this loneliness can cost UK employers around 2.5 billion a year, mostly due to staff turnover, low well-being, obviously equaling lower productivity. Throughout the report, there's a number of key themes that come out, and we're going to touch on some of those themes today. But in particular, we wanted to mention, culture and infrastructure has been really important when looking at workplace loneliness. Thinking about what really matters to employees and how you align workplace values, and management. Hugely important, because obviously what support and training do managers have to help identify and help people if they feel like they know that maybe somebody in their team is struggling with loneliness. And then work and work design, obviously an impact on the obvious thing that springs to mind for everyone right now is hybrid working or working remotely completely. How does that impact loneliness, and what kind of connectivity can we look at to reduce loneliness? So we're going to move into our first question for the panel. There will be opportunity, like I mentioned before, for Q&A. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A section. Please do, if you've got any questions at any point, drop those questions in the Q&A section and we'll come to those at the end and discuss them too. So to kick off with our first question, how do we stay connected in an increasingly technological world? Kevin, I'd like to come to you first with any suggestions that you've got.
Great, thanks, Zoe. What an interesting question. Well, I'd start off by saying that technology has enabled us to be in the position that we are in now, where millions of people are working in a remote or in hybrid fashion, and evidence suggests that productivity is higher than it was pre-pandemic, and UK was in the position where we had the lowest productivity amongst many countries, and this might be an economic gain or a long-term benefit from it. But what we do know is that the workplace as it was is never going to be the same again. Technology is here to stay, and technology is going to get better. So I always say that the opportunities for technology are boundless. Already, there are teams at Microsoft, at Zoom, that are working every day on making that experience even better. And there are all of us that are using Hangout, Teams, Zoom, any of these platforms are seeing improvements being made all the time. Already there is work on virtual workplaces that are incredibly authentic and realistic. So you can see where this is going. But the challenge is that we are also humans and we value interaction to varying degrees. So how does an organization balance that? So what we have done at Pearson, for example, and I'm keen that we try and with real examples. What we've done at Pearson is to say to employees, you indicate to us how you wish to work. And so we offer employees the opportunity to say whether they wish to be hybrid, whether they wish to be remote, or whether they wish to be mainly in the office. So we start off that by giving them the flexibility. But at the same time, we have focused on our workplaces. So we've looked at the workplace, and this is a challenge for all organizations. I don't think it's enough to say, there's a desk, come in, be in there 5 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever. You also need to say to employees, this is a destination workplace. And this is a place where you can come to collaborate. It might be a place where you can get the very best technological facilities. It might be somewhere where you get amazing views. It's set in a city. You can balance some opportunity to go shopping or to go and see a show or something. Or it might be the great coffee. It's a reason to come into the office outside of here's a desk, because work now, because of technology, can be done anywhere, can be done at home, could be done in a cafe, could be done on the train, could be done in an office. The PSI research said that remote hybrid working is a top 5 leadership challenge for the next 5 years. So the challenge for leaders is how can they overcome the challenges of the new way of working, connectedness, social inclusion, belonging, and the emphasis has to be on leaders being able to show more trust and empowerment. I think the balance that you can achieve with technology is there's also an opportunity, because the Edelman Trust Report, which is really interesting, says that 72% of employees trust their employer for the communications more than any other source, including government, media, or the internet. So here's a wonderful opportunity for organizations to connect with their employees through their communications. But they could also focus, as leaders can, on trying to be as authentic and as human as they can be in their communications. I mean, an example might be at Pearson that we're prepared to communicate to our employees on issues that we believe are important. So we're currently committing large sums of money to humanitarian assistance in Ukraine. We've told our employees also that we're placing a major emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our books, in our products, in our curriculum. We're telling the employees about things that are important to us, but they also connect with their values, because we know that there's an increasing generation of employees that are joining the workplace who want organizations to embody the values that they believe are important. So it's a combination and a balance, Zoe. It's not going back to how we were and saying there was a workplace, you've all got to be in there 5 days a week. It's accepting that there is a technological world that offers enormous opportunity, but balancing it with the wonderful benefits of collaboration and face-to-face working that are possible, but redrawn in a different way.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kevin. I think you said some really interesting points there, and definitely about not just trying to revert back to old ways of working and accepting that things have changed now. Work has changed for most people, and just kind of going back to the drawing board and being very open in communication about trying new things with employees, rather than, because this is a challenge for leaders, isn't it, as well? Like, it's new for them too. So just being really open, I think, is really important, and experimenting with different ways of connection, different ways of hybrid working.
I agree, Zoe. But I also believe there's a wonderful opportunity for leaders and organizations for the reasons that I've outlined. But I also believe that hybrid working is actually a stage post on the road to what I call unbound working, which is where we have a situation where work is entirely flexible. And it is down to the employee to decide where they work, and their manager manages them through outputs and outcomes. That is where we're heading. And this is where organizations will get in trouble if they start saying, well, it's hybrid working means 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home and all this. It's not the background to this is there's a war for talent, and the best talent will go to those organizations that offer the greatest flexibility. And that's where I think we're going.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that trajectory. Stephanie, I think you wanted to share some ideas too.
I think the key word that Kevin said there is experience. Is we understand our lives through experience and through emotions and through feelings. And so it's about what is the experience that we create, and everybody will need a different experience. And so that connectivity isn't about necessarily face to face. It's about how do we connect with the individual, understanding their world, what else is going on. We were brilliant at that during lockdown. We all upped our game, and really wanted to know what was going on in people's lives. We couldn't help but see it because their background showed kids, and people had to look after parents, and cats were coming on screen. But we're in a fearful place, I think, like Kevin said, of reverting back a little bit, rather than thinking about what it looks like in going forward. And this idea of culture is not something that we create in an organisation. It's an experience. It's how we make people feel. And the key to that is managers, but also understanding the worlds that people live in and being able to connect to those worlds, creating an experience that's important for them. So the communities, the places, the education that these people spend their lives in, their children spend their lives in, how can we connect with those worlds? If you think back to people like the Levy brothers, north over in the Wirral, they created a whole town for people who worked for them, of where they lived, where they could connect, because they realised that what was important to them was the lifestyle, their children, the education, the doctors that happened. And so we absolutely have to think differently about this idea of connecting internally and switch it out. How do we connect outside of that? Yeah. And really think differently around that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's something around the whole work-life balance conversation, isn't there, that obviously connects to hybrid, flexible working, etc. Tari, have you got anything that you'd like to share on this?
I think I definitely agree with Stephanie and everything that Kevin has also mentioned. But I think what sort of resonated for me is the how are you making people feel element when it comes to this notion of hybrid working, us always being on Zoom calls and Teams meetings. For me, what I am seeing becoming prevalent, and I'm sure everyone can attest to this, in organizations where we do have this hybrid working, you go into the office and guess what you're doing? You're back on the laptop.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, I think it's also now for managers to be a bit more cognizant of that. And if they are asking people to come in particular days, let's try and integrate that connection element, that collaborative element that within the office, so that we then get that connectivity that everybody needs. And it's part of our basic human needs to have that intimacy. It's part of that need for us to have that sense of connection. And in tandem, even if we are going to as the world evolves, as Kevin stated, as we progress beyond hybrid working, which I completely would co-sign with you, Kevin, I think it's also important for us to maintain some of those habits that we did implement during COVID. I remember in my organization, we used to designate buddies. So every day you're going for coffee, a virtual coffee with someone. That stopped. There's this assumption that, we are hybrid working now. But I felt personally within myself that that's actually now creating silos. People now just sort of focus in the little hubs that they have and then neglect the entire organization, the different departments, the people that you'd have been walking past the hallway all the time from, the people that you'd be bumping into in the canteen. So it's about, I guess in summary for me, it's just about that understanding that feeling element, how we're making people feel, but embedding continuous connection points within the office and online that will enable people to just feel like they're still part of a community, because that's what the workplace is. Outside of being, that source of income for us, it's also the community that will push you forward. So yeah, I think that's my sentiments on that.
100% agree with everything that you've just said there, Tari. Thank you. Mark, can I come over to you as well?
Yeah, I was going to be a bit contrarian. So I don't agree with everything that has been said, and I think it's important to have the discussion, because I think for both what we've talked about in terms of human connection and mental health, there's a basic requirement for clarity in the psychological contract, and one of the that you have with people at work, and I think that will continue. And I think one of the risks about what Kevin described as an unbounded view of work, where employees decide how they're going to engage, and the employer, it says, okay, that's fine, do what you want, is that it actually creates the environment potentially for a lot of inconsistency. And so one of the things we're trying to think through is how do we balance flexibility with also fairness? How do we balance collaboration with also clarity? And I think we should, as employers, be putting a real emphasis that in-person human contact is a reasonable expectation for an employee, that being there in person for certain activities at certain times is a reasonable thing that an employer can expect, and be really clear about that up front and sell it in as a benefit. And I think it won't be as simple as employers who say anything goes, get all the talent. I think it's going to be about creating strong cultures where you bring people together and add value through that, and build that strong culture, which I think does and will always require some in-person contact as well. And I think we've seen that in terms of the consequence of the employee. So I think I challenge us to have a nuanced view about it. And I think there's a whole range, and nobody knows the answers. But I think it is important that clarity and boundaries about work are clear.
Yeah,
and I think that establishes a good basis for certainly well-being in the workplace.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for challenging Mark. And I think it connects back to what Tari was touching on as well with, I think it's great if people have, we have a day in the office for this reason or whatever. But I think it connects back to genuine in-person connection. If there's going to be hybrid working and there's going to be set days or a day or whatever it is in the office, that has to actually genuinely be in-person working, rather than everyone just turns up and sits at the laptop online all day, and then you're missing the person-to-person connection on the majority of the day. Maybe in the corridor or when you go and grab yourself a coffee, that might be great, but most of it might feel like, well, I've just done exactly the same thing as I would have done if I was sat at home. So it's a challenge, isn't it? It's hard, and like you said, nobody knows the answer.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, oh, sorry.
After you, Tari.
No, I was, Mark, do you know what? You've raised a very interesting point. You've I think, added the seasoning to the conversation. I do agree to an extent in terms of what you are saying, that clarity and that expectation from the employer, definitely, I think employers definitely must have that, expectation to have people in. But I do sort of stick to what I said, which Zoe has quite well encapsulated, in saying that there has to be clarity when people are coming in, because what we are seeing more of is coming 2 times a week or coming 3 times a week. And what you're doing whilst you're in there, that's none of our business, as long as we're getting stuff done. But come in anyway. So people are coming in. It's forced connectivity, by the way, but they're coming in to be on Teams meeting. If we can find a way as businesses, as senior management teams, to change that narrative, I think and I feel that we will embrace this sort of new way of working better. We will embrace this technology, this intrusion of technology into our lives, so to speak, a little bit better, because we'll understand those parameters. So yes, we do need that clarity, as you stipulated, Mark, but that clarity, perhaps employers have some work to do in thinking about how they are going to provide that.
Just to clarify and come back, Zoe, on my point, and to echo what Tari's saying, and I'm not a million miles away from what Mark was saying either. I did say that even if we go into an unbound environment, and I don't know, I'm blue sky thinking there, I'm saying that I suspect that's where it's going to go. Organizations will still need to provide clarity around the outputs and outcomes that they expect of employees. And for example, at Pearson, we would think about it in the acronym OPERA. So outcomes, parameters, effects, resources, accountability. If you're going to manage people in a remote or a hybrid environment, you need to focus on all those areas. I totally agree with Tari. What I have seen so far, when employees have come back into an office, in organizations generally, is that they come in to do emails, stare at a screen all day, and do Teams calls. So it's about what is work in the office. Is it actually completely rethinking what we do when we come into an office? We clear the calendar of Teams meetings. We try to be on email as little as we can during that day, and we use that day to collaborate, to be in person, to connect with people properly. That's what I would say on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's so many valid points there. And I mean, even from this discussion we've just had, we can see how challenging it is for organisations. And I think it's coming out quite clearly for me anyway, the importance of involving employees and not just enforcing things. I think that's hugely important. And this is a challenge that's not going to go away overnight. This is something we're going to have to adapt to over the next few years, isn't it? If we can move on to the next question, just conscious of time, and I want us to share as much as possible. So the next question is around financial well-being and the connection that can obviously have with loneliness and isolation. So what is financial well-being, and how can it help tackle the isolation associated with financial related stress? And Tari, I'd like to come to you on this first.
Thank you, Zoe. So just to sort of clarify, in terms of my personal definition of what financial well-being is, for me, financial well-being is just having enough finances to manage my day-to-day outgoings, which means I am spending less than I earn, but I'm also able to plan and meet my short-term, medium-term objectives while securing my future in the process. So that financial well-being thing is a present state of being, but it's adding to my future. Now, when we talk about financial well-being and how it tackles isolation with financial related stress, I was actually reading an article the other day that stipulated that a third of people struggling financially also feel lonely. And that's because financial well-being, or our finances rather, they are the ones that help us fund some of these initiatives and things that we enjoy, i.e. socializing, i.e. connecting with people in different ways, even things like our physical health. Sometimes if you're not financially well, your physical health is impacted because there's certain things that you can't do. Even your food quality changes because of the state of your financial wellness. So if we were to tackle isolation with financial related stress, I think there's an importance onus in terms of employers just making sure that those people that are coming to them and they're saying, I need time off because I'm stressed, or I've got mental health issues, or I don't feel like I'm belonging. It's partially asking those questions without offending, obviously. I know finance is a very personal thing and people aren't always forthcoming when they are having financial related stress, but just trying to provide those options there. Is it something we can help you with? Because we can educate you in these areas and hopefully they will then help you feel less connected. If you're educated and empowered to do better with your finances, you find that you're less stressed out about them. And you also then find that because you're managing better, you're able to make resource available to then connect, to then socialize. But when you're not doing well, something that Mark mentioned earlier when he was speaking about people that are renting, for example, and they have they feel threatened by their income because they don't feel like it's that stable. Those sort of scenarios that create isolation, if you're not managing them well based on just a lack of information and knowledge on how to, it will further perpetuate, and people then find themselves really being lonely and then progressing to other harmful thoughts when it comes to their mental health. So going back to answering the question, how can we tackle that isolation associated with financial related stress? Normalize talking about finances in the workplace, right? Number one. And then to educate and empower. Educate and empower. A lot of the times people find themselves in situations because they've not been taught better. So if you educate people to do better, empower them to budget better, spending less than they earn, or coming out of these situations whereby they perhaps are in debt, perhaps they are struggling, especially in light of what we're going through in present day when the cost of living crisis has gone up. if we help them just manage these shockwaves that are coming our way post-pandemic and all these things, then they will feel that the need to isolate yourself becomes less of a need. In fact, you'll then be looking more to connect with people so that you can just make sure that you're on the right page. So for me, it is education. It is tackling that stigma, breaking that stigma, normalize talking about it, normalize providing support, and just normalize as well. I think from a senior management perspective, having where we have mental health champions, perhaps it may be this is a good time to talk about financial wellbeing champions at the same time, because they can then help just broker some of those conversations that people perhaps feel, I can't talk to you about this because maybe you can't help me. But if you have somebody that's championing financial resilience, financial education, financial empowerment, if I come to this person, they'll be able to relate and make sure those people are compassionate. They don't assume everybody's not doing well, because financial resilience is not just about the lack of finances. Sometimes it's just, I am in this place where maybe my tax bracket has gone up so much and I just don't understand it. And now I'm panicking with everything that's going on in the legislation. Have somebody that is compassionate enough to have these conversations and get people out of this thing where they bury their heads in the sand, shut the world out, and end up in worse off situations.
100%. And thank you for sharing that, Tari. And I think it's really interesting as well from a workplace perspective to think about that empowerment angle, because it's not possible for a workplace to just pay everyone more money all the time. No. So the empowerment is so key there, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we are seeing it now, especially where for some organizations that gave bonuses earlier on in the year, a lot of them weren't in line with inflation. So it's almost like you're functioning from a negative place anyway. Your money, you're earning less and your pockets are actually squeezed tighter. So where a lot of organizations can't do that, there are things that they can help people do, i.e. if you're helping them stretch that money a bit better and a bit longer, you find that those people that have been educated to do better end up being in a better position than those people that have received the pay rises, for example. And in this world that is so fragmented technology-wise, etc., I think it's also important for us to have some of these conversations in person and make it a bit of a one-to-one thing. Because I also see a lot of organizations that are trying to sort of tackle that financial resilience element, but saying, here's a digital tool, figure it out yourself. Sometimes it's that conversation and personalization element that helps people get out of these situations.
Yeah, definitely. Stephanie, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a financial expert at all, so I'll leave that part to Tari. But one thing I would say that Tari just mentioned a little bit there is that empathy and being compassionate. And I do come from a family who struggled financially. And one of the things that I personally have experience of is feeling isolated at school when I couldn't do activities that everybody else was doing, and not being able to buy the latest thing. And I wonder if there's an element of our conscious effort at workplaces around the activities that we do to bring people together, that people might not be able to afford some of the activities that people suggest, and they're suggesting them and coming from a good place. But actually that conscious effort to think about the compassionate side of, can everybody afford this? Or is someone stretching themselves because they don't want to talk about that they can't afford it, and therefore they're putting money aside for this activity that could be used better for something else? So that I just wanted to make that point, really, coming from a place where I've experienced that and felt that. I think it was just a point that you said, Tari, about the compassion and how we, as we start to move into this world where we're arranging activities, because it's a nice thing to do, being really aware of that.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to what Kevin was even saying when he was speaking about, what they're doing and helping people choose what would work for them. Is it hybrid working? Is it being in the office all the time? Is it remote? Because you'll find that even people going back into the office has been a big stress. A lot of people saved a lot of money staying at home, and now having to go back into spending such money, and the cost of travel has already gone up, as we know. That in itself has triggered a lot of mixed emotions in people. I'm one of them. I relocated from London, and I'm now in Northampton. Whilst a lot of my colleagues look forward to team gatherings and all these other things, you know, every week and every other week, and coming into the office this many times, a lot of the times it's, oh, actually, can I afford to go out for drinks because I now have this additional journey added to my outgoings? Or is it that we create a better balance maybe of some of these social interactions and the need to be in the office by maybe using that technology differently, going back to doing some of those games and team building activities we were doing online to just help those people that are not able to be there in person, that are feeling financially restricted, to not feel lonely and cut off from the rest of the business.
I think it's a really important point around flexibility, isn't it? Like touching back on what we were discussing in the previous question. Obviously, encouraging in-person interaction is brilliant, but we need to think about the cost of living increase and the fact that people have adapted their salary to their current circumstance of working from home. And then all of a sudden, oh, you've got to be back in the office 2 days a week, and that's going to cost me an extra £100 or so extra pounds on top of what I've got used to spending. And if you're maybe on a lower income, like all these things add to stress.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kevin, have you got anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, really supporting what Tari and Steph were saying. But I think organisations have to be a bit more aware of the lived experience of employees. And if you understand the lived experience, and if you can be there and support employees, but also allow them flexibility to find the right path for themselves, knowing that there's a parameter and a framework and there's support. So you're backing up what Tari was saying, education and awareness, and the conversation about financial well-being, supporting that conversation within an organisation can be of enormous benefit to employees, because they know that they might be able to find content and resources that might help them. They might, it might be okay to recognise that there are financial challenges. So it is supporting the lived experience. I mean, I could expand it further. If we better understand the lived experience of our female employees. So, you know, many organisations are rushing to draw up menopause policies. Well, that's great. That's starting to understand a bit about the lived experience. But are we thinking about menstruation? Are we thinking about women's safety? Are we thinking about women's health in the broadest context? So there's a lot more that organisations can do around supporting the lived experience, the whole of the lived experience of employees. If organisations support that, they will get the very best talent. They will get the very best from the people that they employ.
Yeah, definitely, Kevin. And I think it comes back to pretty much every single challenge that a workplace has faced before in the past, that one size doesn't fit all. And I've seen some comments in the chat along those lines, and it comes back to that genuine nature of flexibility. And if you're saying that you're flexible, it's hard to then dictate things, because that's not flexible. So it's a huge challenge, isn't it? It's not like everyone's got the answers right now, but it's something that we need to really keep thinking about. How do we meet the needs of a population of however many people, and not just think about what works for 50% of them?
Exactly. And we're getting some really great comments in the chat, and people have their lived experience and their own personal experience. And that's why the flexibility is so important, that employees get the opportunity to be able to find the pattern that works best for them, and their organisation supports them and creates the parameters, the outputs, the outcomes. Yeah,
definitely. Mark, would you like to add any comment on this question?
Yeah, just really the not one size fits all is so important, and it works. I think what Tari's talking about is how do you create the conditions where someone would disclose? What kind of psychological safety what does that look like in a way that someone would say, actually, this is my specific need, and whatever that need is, and financial stress is probably is covered in stigma, but then there are a whole range of others. And I come back to that disclosure, a bit like fun and play and laughter, and we just don't really know how that works online so much. And I think we need to understand a lot more about whether or not how you build cultures with that safety that would allow people to disclose, because there are conversations, even if I make sure I spend about at least 20 minutes if I'm in the office, just walking around the office, which I never used to do, and just connecting with people. And I just pick up things that I would never have done. No one would have said it if I was at home. So we just need to balance the flexibility with the human contact and the ability to connect with each other, because psychologically, that's the way we've done things for the whole of human history. And we need to protect and just be careful around that, I think, because disclosure and safety with human contact is something that's very deeply wired within us.
Definitely, I agree with that. I think there's a lot of trial and error in moving forward, isn't there, to find the right balance. If we can move on to the next question, that would be brilliant. Just while I think there's already quite a few questions and comments, which is fabulous, but just a reminder, if you can share in the chat maybe any ideas or interventions that you've tried in your own workplaces that have helped to keep people connected, that would be brilliant. And hopefully we're drawing on some of those, but it's great to hear from people, because you never know, you might see someone else's comment in the chat and think, oh, actually, that would be perfect for my workplace. I want to go and try that too. So please do keep dropping those comments, and also in the Q&A, any questions that you'd like us to chat about. We'll come to Q&A shortly, and do drop those in the Q&A section too. Thank you. If we can move on to the next, we just wanted to briefly mention, because managers has come up in the employers and loneliness report about a key, a key perspective, thinking about your managers within your workplace context, like how are they equipped to support people who may be struggling with loneliness, and how are they equipped to support people who may be feeling disconnected because of hybrid or remote working, etc. At Mental Health First Aid England, we have a course called Mental Health Skills for Managers, and it's a short course that's fundamentally focused on the absolute basics that we believe that anyone who's a people manager should know. So how to ask questions, how to listen non-judgmentally, and how to respond, and fundamentally how to not avoid having these difficult conversations. That's where we're trying to get to. If this is something that you think might be relevant for your managers, please do reach out to us. You can drop us an email at workplace@MHFA England, and we'd be more than happy to have a chat with you. If we can move into the next question. So this question is, how can we reconnect through fun and laughter, obviously with an online and offline context? And Stephanie, you're definitely the go-to initially on this question. So if you could share with us.
So one thing I'd like to say at first is it's not about enforced fun. Even I don't like enforced fun, and I think that switches everybody off, and it's not about balloon-a-thons and dressing up, although that, can be fun sometimes. But it's about this idea of it's making things a little bit more informal. When I started doing what I do 20 years ago, I went into a bank, I won't tell you who, and that's what got me doing this. And I was like, wow, how are these people talking to each other? What's going on? Why is that person behaving like that? So informality, I think, is important, and not just informality, just be normal in the way that we talk and our language as well. And then there's just some really fun, simple stuff to do. And I know people like really practical stuff. So one of the things that we do here at Laughology and also in other workplaces as well. So if you're online, we have a word of the day. and someone has that word of the day, and you have to try and get it into as many calls or Zooms as possible. And then at the end, we put it on the WhatsApp group about what was that word? Can anyone guess what that word was? So just some simple stuff like that can be quite fun as well. But it is also about, and by the way, I want to make it's not about joke telling here. It's about connecting with your playfulness, your inner child. And the three things that I always say is important for loneliness is connecting to people, connecting to nature, and connecting to your inner child, and playfulness and conscious inclusion, which is the fourth one, but it's not about connectivity. And when we talk about connecting to your inner child, it can be anything from getting rid of technology if you are in person. And it's really important because technology has really helped us to connect. But if you're in person, getting rid of that technology and having conversations, bringing in just games and playfulness in a way that includes everybody. And what you've got to remember here is neurodiversity. So for some people, actually that isn't helpful and it isn't fun and it's not enjoyable. So it's about making sure that you do something that's helpful as well. But also, it's this idea of getting together and not talking about work. So put work aside and just getting together and having fun together in whatever way that might be. And it doesn't matter what that is, it's different to everybody. A couple of things that you can do really instantly. So once a week, get together with your team and ask people what's made them laugh that week. That's what I'd say. And that works twofold. So it goes, one, first of all, you're changing the way people think immediately and feel immediately. And secondly, you're helping people to connect to the experiences that make them laugh throughout the week, because they know that's going to be expected of them at the end of the week. So just have a chat. What's made you laugh this week? And the second thing is get people in groups together and have, if you are on Zoom, and just have conversations in Zoom about what have you enjoyed this week? What else have you done? Anything that's not work related, that is what that chat's about. So you can use tech, but also face to face.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to kind of sometimes take that conversation away from work, isn't it? To get people to open up a little and build that connection. Kevin, is there anything that you have been doing at Pearson that's kind of more to do with building a social connection?
Yeah, trying to arrange activities that look at a lighter and more social side. So we've organised breakfast Mondays. So you come in and you get a free breakfast, and you just get a chance to chat and to talk, and that's okay. You know, further to some of the comments in the chat, you know, how do we get the time in our busy workload? With the companies creating opportunities and offering something, then that can help. We've also said that during Wimbledon we'll screen live matches, and we'd like people to come in. They'll be screened in the office, and it's trying to look at a fun and more social side of life and work, because that's the reality of people's lives. You know, life goes on around work, so we try and dovetail both.
And what I'd really try and encourage people to do, and the whole organisation has to do this, it has to be led from the top, is to have at least one day where there is no meetings whatsoever. So you can't have an official meeting. You can call someone up, you can have a chat to them, but the whole organisation has to do it for it to be effective. And do you know what you'll find? You'll claw so much more time back, because people will have those water cooler moments either on the phone or connecting to people. But have at least one day where it's a no meeting rule in the diary. It just gives people that time back and to be able to connect in a unstructured way. And we've become so structured and so transactional in our connections. We need to get rid of that to allow this connectivity through fun and laughter. And incongruity supports laughter and fun. So when we're not expecting it. And that's why we've had this lower wave of people feeling that their work is fun, because it's all been structured and transactional.
Yeah, I think you've definitely got a really good point there. I think it's it's hard, isn't it, to especially when you're working from home and you're working remotely. I think people probably feel the need to almost prove themselves more, that they're online, they're available to join meetings, and people end up going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and they never have any time in between, and then you're missing out those social engagements. So we've had lots of different suggestions in the chat as well, which is great. So I hope everyone's reading through those, virtual yoga, coffee chats, all the rest of it. But yeah, it's hard because you don't want to enforce fun, but you do want to encourage it. So it's I think somebody in the chat mentioned that they're trying to put things on, but because it's optional, they're not necessarily getting good attendance, which is a challenge in itself, isn't it?
Look, I'm just be curious as well. Curiosity is the key to playfulness. It's one of the ingredients in playfulness. So ask curious questions, and I can send you a list of questions that we ask for Teams and on Teams as well. You can have it. And it's these things like, what was your first job? What was the first album that you ever bought? What was your first, who was your first kiss? And what was it like? You know, be curious to get to know people more, and not work stuff, but really playful questions. And if people don't want to answer them, that's fine as well. But it's this idea that it starts these different conversations and memories are beautiful for fun and laughter, and it connects people because you then get a shared experience. And if we're talking about connecting here, we need to connect through building relationships that aren't about work. It can't be about work. You need to start from that foundation that is nothing to do with work, and then it flourishes. Then if you need to have a challenging conversation, it's so much easier, and people are more likely to share, be open and honest with you as well.
Definitely. Sorry, I'm just really conscious of time, and this is a great discussion, but we are at the point of wrapping up, really. One thing that we quickly wanted to mention is if anyone's not seen the My Whole Self campaign by Mental Health First Aid England, please take a look. It's a free campaign with lots of resources and toolkits, and there's some ideas on supporting people working remotely in there that might be really helpful, tips and suggestions. So please go and take a look on our website for those. There's so many great questions and comments in the chat, and I would love to spend the next hour or two going through them all. So hopefully we can draw some of those questions out and build them into future webinars and future content. So thank you, even if we haven't managed to answer your question, thank you for making the question, because it'll really help with framing what might be helpful moving forward. And thank you all to our panelists. You've been amazing. We've had some really good discussion. Thanks for taking the time out to be here. Thanks for everyone who attended. There's been a few comments around it. Will they be available afterwards, this webinar? We have recorded it. It will be online, and we'll share it with you. So if you've missed any part of it, feel free to go back or share with colleagues, etc. Thanks again to everyone who came along, and I hope you have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.